Hi Steve, welcome to Why Arts podcast. I'm so excited to have you on this podcast, and I have been so inspired by your works for so many years. So I am honored that you're part of this space. But I know a lot of people already know you, but we should start with introductions. Could you share more about you?
Sure,
Oh.
sure. Where would you like me to begin? I'm happy to be here. I'm Steve.
Yes.
Still Steve. And I guess, a kind of introduction of the moment is that I, for the last couple of years, have, after 51 years, I'm not full-time working in a school. So I think of myself as a retired teacher, a continuing, endlessly researcher with an association here at Project Zero, which is where we are, and a grandpa and a friend and a citizen who is trying to figure out on a daily basis how to respond to the changes in this country.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. I resonate with that. To begin with, I would love to know when in your, looking back in your growing up years, where you felt like art gave you a way to express or a language when you were growing up.
Yeah. So, I was, I guess, an important piece of this. I mean, since you talk about language, I was hard of hearing probably from birth. We're not completely sure, because I also had an early childhood illness which may have impacted my hearing. I had serious speech impediments, not delay. I was speaking, I think my development of speech and language was a normal trajectory, whatever that is. But people couldn't understand me. My first grade teacher wrote on my report card, "I think Steve can read, but I can't tell because when we read out loud, I can't understand what he says." This led to, not to a hearing test, unfortunately, but hearing test and audiology in the mid-1950s was not what it is today. It was not standard. But it did lead to speech therapy. So I did speech therapy for 6 or 7 years. And I learned how to speak to be understood. What I did not come to understand at that time was that I also still was not hearing properly. But I was, I guess, thought of as shy. Somehow found my way, or someone helped me find a way, probably my mother, into a theater class at the Jewish Community Center when I was, I'm gonna say 11, somewhere in there. And I loved it. I felt I was it was just really fun. I mean, I don't know what I thought at the time, except that it was a social space with a structure and a purpose, and we were encouraged to have fun in that context. And I needed help with that. So that led me subsequently, when I kind of aged out of that in another year or so, it led me to another community arts center out of school that focused on the performing arts. And that was, I didn't really understand until considerably later how radical a space that was. It was pedagogically really interesting, but this was in Baltimore, Maryland, in the early 1960s, and it was a totally racially integrated space with progressive scholarship policies. So people from all over the city were there. It was very, very hard to find spaces in Baltimore in that period where young people came together in that way. It just was not common. And I appreciate, I'll say her name, Deborah London, was the director, and she did a couple of things that I thought were really profound and had a big impact on me for a long time, till now. One was that this was a economically equitable space. Anybody could access it. Two, it was racially integrated, as I said, but I cannot emphasize enough the commitment that Deborah London and her staff made to making that happen and making it work. She also felt that, if you had an interest in dance, that could be your main interest, but you were going to study music, you were going to study theater, you were going to study scene design, costume design, you're going to do all those things. So I had to do it all, which meant that at, 13, 14, I was taking ballet, jazz, modern, because I had to, because I was mostly interested in theater and acting, but that's what everybody did. She also felt that, particularly at our early age of development and training, that we should have the best teachers. That's when you need the best teachers. Yeah. So she felt, fairly or not, I don't know, that there wasn't a ballet teacher in Baltimore who was good enough. And so she brought a man from New York down every Saturday to teach us. And I studied acting with the director of the local repertory theater, which was an outstanding theater man named Ed Golden. The designers were all professional designers. I mean, I was working with professionals really early. And through that, I was, got called to auditions in Baltimore for local professional theaters. And I had, I got jobs.
Yeah, that's so interesting that also because you had that experience early on, you were able to explore this whole language of theater, which might not have happened if you were just in school, just in how traditional academic languages are there. And I'm curious, so then how this trajectory from being an actor transitioned into being an educator, and then you were also a theater educator for so many years in Boston Public School. So how was that transition, and why did you thought of making that transition?
Well, so this was, I graduated from high school in the late 1960s, and I felt that I wanted to be an actor. I did learn pretty quickly that being a professional actor as an adult, that you can't, even at that time, you couldn't live on $50 a week. And that being a professional actor as an adult was a very different equation from being a kid actor. So I was looking then for ways to pursue theater that also addressed my concerns about what America was. And that led me to leave school, leave my undergrad education after a year, and move to Boston, where there was a street theater that I was interested in. And I came up, I got a ride from a friend in New York to Boston. I thought, well, I'd just go to the theater and, say, can I work here?
Yeah.
I mean, I had no idea how the world worked. But I got this ride. I get to Boston. I go to the theater, and lo and behold, it's closed. And I forget why, but I needed to go back to New York the next morning. And I just felt stupid. That theater was in a church that's just like 200 yards away from us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's my first time in Cambridge. And I walked around that church about 40 times just thinking, what was I thinking? But I just read.
Yes.
Can I read you one line?
Yes, please.
So it's a book is called A Place in Space. And the first essay is called North Beach. Here's the first line. In the spiritual and political loneliness of America of the 50s, you'd hitch 1,000 miles to meet a friend. And it seems kind of crazy to me now, but somebody said they were driving to Boston. I said, great, I'll go. Got in the car, I got to Boston, and I get to this place. And then as I'm standing on the steps after about a half an hour of just walking around the building and thinking, now what do I do? A woman walked up and said, excuse me, are you here for the audition? So I said, sure. And lo and behold, about in the next 20 minutes, people started to show up, and I auditioned. And
I'm curious, so then how was it like starting to teach, and like how I would love to hear more about like your teaching experiences from like being a theater educator, and like how was it being in school in that period of time, and like how was it for the arts, and like how were the conversations happening in classrooms for you?
Well, a lot of chances, really. Just like that, if I'd walked away 5 minutes earlier. I worked with the street theater. I then worked with I started to work with some puppeteers. Fall term of their new school called a group school.
Oh yeah.
And they asked us, Patty and I, if we would keep teaching a drama class. And we did. The school, I think two things are really important about the school, and they've been profound for me. One is that these were young people who were, what's the word that I want? Disillusioned with school. Many of them were truant, some had dropped out, some of them could handle regular school but didn't like it at all. And the common theme for them was that they felt that the school did not respect who they were as working class people. They wanted a school that respected them as working class people. So identity was a very powerful core element of the school. I would call it the animating core. It was a feature of everything about the school. And the second was that they wanted control. They wanted to go to the school that they wanted to go to. And the way you make that happen is that you have power. So it was a democratic school. And that was always messy, as democracy is. I don't think anyone was ever fully happy with anything because you were compromising all the time. Right? But we were inventing it together, and we were really listening to each other. And I think that, though I certainly didn't have the language, that's where a pedagogy of listening really first.
Yeah.
And what I understand now is that listening is not enough. If you're really engaged with young people and you're listening to them, when you hear what they want and need, you have to be committed to acting in response to that. So if students said, well, we want the school to, we want to change the start time of the school, or the grading system, or what's being offered.
Yeah.
If you didn't, it wasn't enough to just listen to them. You had to say, oh, well, what would that really look like? How would we do it?
Yeah.
Would it serve everybody? Would it be, you guys want this, but do these other students want this? What would be the problems? Does that mean a longer school day, a shorter school day? And when you're starting a school, and this is why I think anybody who ever gets to start a school has the best education. The best education in education is to start a school, because you have to figure out everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the more alternative that school is, the more you've opened up all of the possibilities of what a school can be, the better, because then you really have to figure it out. And part of what you realize is that a school is never finished. It has to be always changing in response. That's democracy too. And that is a commitment to a way of life, not just an idea about systems.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm curious, like you mentioned about like identity and like students, and like how did you feel like theater education and you as educators were able to support them in building that voice?
In the first summer, Patty and I basically taught an improv class. It was fun. Everybody was like, what? They thought we were crazy, but we had a good time. In the fall, students started to say, are we going to do a play? And so we started to bring scripts in. And Patty and I shared a love of kind of contemporary, absurdist playwrights. We loved Samuel Beckett, we loved Harold Pinter, Ionesco, and so on. When we brought in scenes from those plays to read and start to, play with, it was pretty clear that they were not loved. The plays were not really connecting. So we just kept looking for other stuff. And I think one day Patty brought in a copy of a play by Clifford Odets, who was an American playwright, did most of his big writing in the 30s, 40s. And he had written a play called Waiting for Lefty, which was about taxi drivers. This was in the 1930s in America, about taxi drivers who were trying to decide whether to go out on strike. And it was beautifully constructed for us, because it was a bunch of 2 or 3 person scenes, and then it all comes together at the end at the Union Hall when they're trying to decide whether to go on strike or not. I won't tell you because it would spoil it, but they do go on strike. In any case, when we brought that play in, the first time we handed out the mimeographed copies of the scenes, it was a completely different experience. People who we thought were not sure whether they just what their reading level was, because they'd been so kind of hesitant, checked out, not quite. it's like giving people a drug which woke them up from a daze.
Yeah.
Because it was their language, their situations,
Yeah.
you know, people trying to make a living, feeling like they're being down by the company, tensions at home because there's not enough money. It was all speaking to and from and through their experience. And they not only did everybody start to, with their reading, I'm not saying that their reading level went up, their investment in making sense of the text came alive. And they brought everything they had to it, and we saw just a completely different relationship. I think, you know, I'd like to think that I had the language then. I know that I didn't.
Yeah.
I absolutely did not. But I know that that day that we first brought in, and then the whole experience that we had with that play was amazing. And what became clear to me then was representation matters. People do need to see themselves, their lives, reflected in the art. Not in every single piece of art that they look at, but in order to feel like theater is a powerful medium, and I want to do the work, the hard work, of getting myself to become capable and proficient in that medium, I need to see myself in that. And I think that's true with poetry, I think that's true with short stories, I think that's true with pretty much anything, including history and science, etc.
Yes, I agree. I think you bring a big point of this like interest and like how when like even if you what you bring to your children, like I work with young children and I'm always like thinking about, okay, what are their interest areas? Am I able to respond? If I'm bringing, I don't want to bring something just because I want to do it with the kids. Like I want to bring something which they want to do and they generally care about and they're interested in building that inquiry. And I think that's such a big part, and the role of an educator is like you don't need to know all the pedagogies or you know the fancy things, but in the heart, like if you have a relationship with the kids, and like that takes you to so many places. And I'm curious to hear about like your experiences with children, like what kind of things emerged from children as they were part of these theater classes, because not everybody goes out to become an actor or a professional, but so many things which we learn in a theater classroom which is kind of needed in all parts and walks of life. So I would love for you to like talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, most of ours. I mean, I taught theater for 18 years, and you know, less than this number ever, you know, really had a professional career. It was never my intention, or this was not a conservatory, this was not a pre-professional training program, etc. And many years later, when I look back at it, I've come to realize that the roots of theater are not in commerce. The roots of theater are in community and in storytelling and in education and teaching ourselves, the young. And that's what, I mean, in a way, it was what drew me to theater always, was something very elemental and not commercial. So in a period, well, really of 5 to 10 years, I was giving up more of my professional theater work. I did go on for 15 years doing more avant-garde and experimental theater, off-Broadway, off-Broadway, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, you know, I mean, I was continuing to do that work, but teaching felt central to me.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like, if you could share a little bit more about the teaching part of like children, like when you, like children when they came back to you after years of being out of the school, like what were the things they were sharing about, like which stayed with them when they were in the theater class, and like how I, like how that happened, helped them fundamentally as a human, that when they went out and in different parts of their life. Because I also, like when I hear from people like why we do arts in K to 12 education is, it's not that we're training them to become professional artists, but this is more like fundamental of like human, and like what are the value systems which we're building from these experiences.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back in some ways, Nandi, to something I wrote about in Making Learning Visible. I wrote a chapter in that book, which came out of a collaboration with our colleagues in Reggio Emilia. A chapter called no, wait a minute, what's it called? To be part of something bigger than oneself.
Mm.
I think that that's one of the main things that people got a taste for. And tried to find wherever they went in the rest of their lives. I think the people in the theater program in particular felt like being part of something bigger than yourself and doing something creative, expressive, that's not functionally valuable. That is, you're not building a building. You're not engaged in a political activity that changes local policies.
Yeah.
You're just creating this thing. No functional value.
Yeah.
But why is it so important to so many people? That's a huge question.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important because it gives meaning to our experience. It helps us to, theater in particular, theater focuses on moments in people's lives. It's very, we have all of these moments, some of them quite dramatic, some of them just kind of the quiet drama of everyday life. We live them, we all live them with powerful internal lives, rich, and sometimes, again, quite dramatic external lives, but mostly not. But it goes by. We can write about it, we can talk about it, we make stories about it to try to give those experiences shape and meaning.
Yeah.
And theater is that. That's what theater to me, at part of its root. Theater is a lot of things, but part of its root is giving shape to human lived experience.
Yeah. And that is so powerful and underrated at the same time by the people who work in the academic field, I think, as also like how these like rich moments are not often like showed up in like assessments or like like those rubrics which we are often like, we are as arts people I think are tired of always like fighting for that space. And I'm curious, like, so that like now that I moved from the journey of like your theater education and then you started like when you entered like the Harvard world, the Project Zero world, and then you started like being a professor in more pedagogy and like looking at arts education, and I'm curious to like hear about that journey of like opening up, not just like for you brought a lot from theater education and then you kind of this like meta level understanding of arts education which you entered into, and like a little bit about like pedagogical connections and like how did you brought that experience of teaching into that.
Sure. I think one thing, two things that I'll say about the arc of the years that I taught theater.
Yeah.
The first is that I never felt like an especially good actor, or that's not even what matters. I never felt like I totally understood what acting was. I always felt like I was a student of acting. And, I crafted curricula and, we invented a lot of curricula, all of which is on the website. But I was engaged in a form, now I would use the language in a form of research.
Yeah.
And I do believe that teaching is a legitimate form of research, both into learners and learning, but also your own research into the subject matter itself. So that's very important. And that was true for me the entire time I taught acting. But teaching the Boston schools was very, very difficult and a world apart from teaching in a small alternative democratic high school. There was no sense of flexibility, responsiveness, control, agency on the part of students, barely respect for them. It was a very, very tough environment. I could talk much more about that, but we had this theater program. I taught every day. I think we did some really good stuff. There were some curricular innovations that emerged for me, that emerged from all of that. But overall, it wasn't theater really in a community, because that was a school that was not a community.
Yeah, and I think that also kind of ruins it for children sometimes when it is so structured. Like specifically, I feel like arts, which has to be like, everything should be creative and open, but specifically arts, I feel, I see like a lot of students like kind of like give up on it when they have these kind of experiences, which is so rigid, and they are expected to be this like refined black and white kind of images, which doesn't work. So I'm curious, like, so then what led you to having more deeper understanding into like research and pedagogy than like with these experiences?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing that I want to say is that at South Boston, there were amazing art teachers, and they created, I watched people, there was a music teacher, Curtis Warner, was amazing. There were 2 art teachers, and this is 45 years ago, so forgive me. But I remember spending time, I would go to their rooms just to feel like I was in a comfortable space. There are just so many people who have dedicated their lives to creating essentially alternative spaces within schools that are in many ways harsh environments. Security in the halls, people yelling at kids. I mean, just not supportive spaces. But there are many teachers who create alternative spaces. And many of those people are art teachers, and they, so I know what can be done, and I know how important it is to young people. But it was really hard for me. I started to teach, I thought, okay, I kind of need to get out of here. And I started to teach at Roxbury Community College because it was kind of the next step. And in fact, at Roxbury Community College in Boston, I taught I had students who I'd had at South Boston High School.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because they had gone on to community college. There they were. And I loved that. But it was, I just had a little, a class here, a class there. So, and I had 2 kids. That wasn't enough. A job was opening up at Roxbury Community College. And the people who were hiring me to do the adjunct work said, you can apply for this job, but you don't have a master's. So you should just enroll in a master's right now, so that you don't even have to have it. You can apply if you're in the program. And I looked around and tried to figure out whether to get a theater master's, an MFA. That would have been fine. Or an education master's. And there's a longer story to this, but I wound up here. And the first week I was here, I was part-time because I was still teaching, and I was only taking courses that were like the 4 o'clock on courses. The first week I was here, I was assigned Howard Gardner as my advisor, and I met with him for about a minute, and he said, "Tell me what you do." And I said, "Well, I teach." I don't know why I said this, but I said, "I teach playwriting in the Boston Public Schools, in high schools." And he said, "Oh, we have a project right now that we're doing, and part of it is about teaching playwriting in high schools." And he wrote down this phone number and he said, "Call this person." So I called her and she said, "Oh, great. Why don't you come to our next meeting?" And I've been coming to meetings at Project Zero ever since.
Wow.
And your question, how did I make that transition into research? I had no idea. When I showed up at my first meeting at Project Zero, and I'm not kidding you, I went to meetings every week for a year. I don't think I ever opened my mouth. I was completely intimidated. I felt I was way out of my, I was just trying to learn the language and understand what these people were doing. But meanwhile, I was sharing materials. I had a whole playwriting curriculum. I said, "Yeah, you can use this." And they took that to Pittsburgh where they were doing this project. Eventually, they invited me to come to the meetings in Pittsburgh. And a lot of the things that I became interested in eventually that led in many ways to the Reggio Emilia work were started in that project, Arts Propel, which was a project about assessment in the arts. Now, I won't go down the road on the details of that, but it led directly to the group of educators that I've hosted, convened for 30 years now, continue to, called Rounds, where we look at student work. It was great for me. Serious education researchers who valued the arts. I didn't ever have to make the argument with them. They saw the value. They knew that it was important in young people's lives. They'd done groundbreaking work that I was just getting exposed to. And it was amazing now, because these books that I'm starting to realize exist, I never knew that they were there. And I'm like, I'm sitting at a table with this person wrote that book, this person wrote that book, this person wrote that book. I was like, how, pinch yourself, how does this happen? It wasn't until later that I was invited to teach a course here. And then about 2 years into teaching a course, the director role for the Arts and Education program, which was established by Jessica Davis, who had been at Project Zero, Jessica was leaving, and it opened up, and the dean at that time called me in and said, she actually said, "Jessica's leaving, I'm going to shut down the Arts and Ed program."
Wow.
And I said, "Why?" And she said, whatever she said. And I said, "Okay, but do you know that this program is really loved and that it's very unusual, and that if Harvard shuts down a Arts and Ed program, there will be people all over the country who will raise questions, and are you ready for the press to call you?"
Yeah.
I had no idea whether the press would call, and I'm sure that they wouldn't.
Yeah.
But she was like, "Oh, let me think about it." And then she called me back like 2 days later, and she said, "I want you to be the director of it." And I said no. And tried to get Shari to do it, Shari Tishman. Shari, it wasn't a good time for her to do it. She would have been great, but asked my wife what I should do, and she said, "That's the job you should be in." And it was great advice.
Yeah.
So I took it.
Yeah, so I am curious. Thank God, thank you for doing that job at that point of time that we have a little bit of arts still like alive and going, and we have some courses about arts. What did you teach first, and like how did that journey of like teaching people coming from all walks of life enter into like arts education, and why? What was so like what? If I have to like, what were the important things which you started teaching about arts education? Because like coming back to like why arts, and like thinking about arts as a pedagogy and an action for people entering into it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, but it's not an easy one.
Yeah.
And it wasn't easy for me. As the director of the program, the way the structure that I inherited was that you teach a year-long required core course. And I didn't have much time to plan it, because it only really, I had a summer to think about it.
Yeah.
As soon as I was in the room with the first cohort that I worked with, and they were all over the arts map, right? Both in terms of the different art forms that they worked with, and the different settings that they worked in. Some were classroom teachers, some were youth workers out of school, museums, you name it, right? And that, it's just a fantastic example of where diversity really is just an incredible blessing. I mean, I think diversity is a blessing all the time. Sometimes it's great to just be with the high school theater teachers.
Yeah.
But when I got in that room, the conversation opened and was enriched 1,000-fold. And it was like mind-blowing to do that. And I felt it and embraced it immediately. And among the things that I felt was that, well, I don't just have this, small, dedicated group of high school theater teachers in the world. People who are amazing and do great work. But I'm not just in conversation with them. I'm in conversation with all the music teachers, with all the visual arts and with people, the culinary arts people, and on and on and on. And it was just like going from, a stand of trees in a forest that were all the white birches, right? And to a forest that had all of these different kinds of amazing growth. So what then? But pedagogically, it was a huge challenge, because I wasn't teaching how to be a theater teacher, and I wasn't teaching how to be a visual arts teacher to 3-year-olds. What did I know about that? I didn't know that. So in many ways, the expertise was all in the room, although everybody had come to school because they felt that they didn't have the expertise they wanted. They wanted something else. So what could a core course provide? And what I landed on, for better or for worse, I don't know. The initial thing that I landed on were kind of core questions, and I would say core questions, and there were many different ways that I articulated these questions, but some of the questions were basically, why do you do this thing you do? And so, like, are you in touch? This comes to this podcast, Why Arts? Why are you an art teacher? And why do you do what you do in the way that you do it? Because I felt very strongly, and I know that this goes back to my group school experience, that we are guided by a sense of purpose. That's the why. and values. And that's in the way that you do it. So, there are art teachers who will go into a classroom and critique people and say, look, I'm preparing people for a career, and they need to learn how to hear tough response. So there's a space in which that's going to happen, and I'm going to let them know, and there are other people who wouldn't do that at all. So these are people who believe in the value, but they clearly have a different sense of purpose, and we're all in this business together,
yeah.
right? And they have very different values.
Yeah.
So, is that sort
Yeah,
of clear?
yeah.
So I had
Sure.
sort of more, I can't remember the exact, language that I used in the beginning, but over the years, a lot of things came down to that. And I think that the third question was a question of quality. Like, how do you know that you're doing the best you can be doing? And are you continually asking that question?
Yeah.
This is, by the way, an interesting point around the gift I had of continuing to do research while I was also doing this teaching, because I was involved in the qualities of quality study. And part of what and I know that it shaped and clarified and framed my teaching moving forward. Part of what we realized in that study was that what anyone would call quality, there is no absolute about quality in art education, art teaching and learning. You could have 3 people walk into 3 classrooms and completely disagree about whether what was happening in each of those arts rooms was quality education. And if you try to track that, how can that be? If you try to track that down, it basically goes back to those. Quality is essentially the adherence, the pursuit of a purpose, clearly informed by a set of values. It doesn't mean that you're always achieving it, but you're always working at it, right? So if I share a particular teacher's general sense of purpose for teaching visual art in middle school, right? And I share basic values with them, it is likely that I'll walk into that room and respond with a feeling. When we did that study and we asked like 250 people, well, what is quality arts education?
Yeah.
They said, oh, I can't really, and an amazing number of people said, I can't tell you what it is, but I know it when I see it. So then the question that from a research perspective, after like 70 people said that to us, we said, okay, let us ask you a different question. If you walked into a room and you say, you know it when you see it, and you thought it was high quality, what are you seeing? And they started to describe that, and that became a huge part of the data from the study.
Yeah, that is so interesting because again, like assessments is something like I've been like thinking about and talking, because in like more academic settings or traditional schools, like arts do not get a lot of like percentage of like telling about a child. Like it's always like math, science, social studies, whatever, English, literacy. They have given more importance and like, for what so many reasons. And I'm curious, like, what was your experience in bringing like arts? Like, how did you kind of shared to people who maybe did not agree with you about why arts and like why are we doing this and why is it important? I mean, this is a big question, and I'm sure you would have so many things, but like, what do you feel is like most resonating to you right now when we talk about this? Especially, I'm thinking about like like now with this generation of like technology and also like so many things entering into this like world. I like, why is it like, why the power of like a body expressions or a pen or a paper still so relevant in today's world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really a kind of, I tell me if I'm not right, but I feel like you're asking a basic question about arts advocacy or arts and education advocacy. And, like, how do you make the argument?
Yes.
I mean, honestly, I don't make the argument. I've stopped.
Yeah.
I don't, there are a lot of, because who are you making the argument to? You're making the argument to people who don't see the value, who prioritize something else. And in my experience with administrators, of which I've had quite a bit, some of it great, and these people are angels, they get what you're doing, they know it matters to kids, they know that families care about it and feel it, and they want to support you. That's heaven. A lot of them think this is a waste of money and they should be putting their resources somewhere else.
Yeah.
I can't argue with those people. There's nothing I can show them.
Yeah.
Many people have said, we need more research that proves the value of the arts.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think you can prove it. And I don't think even if you could, it would make a difference. I mean, look, we have climate science. It's not proving it to people who don't want to believe it.
Yeah.
So I'm not anti-research. I'm deeply invested in research. But from an advocacy point of view, I don't think that that's a particularly generative path.
Yeah.
I also, so if I'm talking to an administrator or principal, and they're telling me that they're probably going to try to get rid of the art. I've had this experience. Try to get rid of the arts class or the partnership or whatever it is, right, with the arts organization. I would, in a sense, try to change the direction of the conversation and start to ask them to tell me about the school. Let's say I don't know the school, or if I'm closer involved, say, tell me what you think are the priorities and why. Why does that matter? And I would just keep going in that conversation till I found something that the two of us actually agreed on. If they said, look, I am really worried about kids' health. I'd say, what about kids' health? Well, whatever it is, mental health, eating habits, obesity, whatever. Say, okay, well, I am too. And it's not just to, look, if that principle, I don't think that the arts are always the best thing for everybody all the time. So if that principle says, this is where I am putting resources, because I don't think that, when kids are hungry or malnourished or whatever, or struggling with mental health issues, that they can learn to read and write. I think, that's their analysis. I'm going to be all in to support that, because ultimately, I know that the arts will find their way. That if that principal and I can be connected, I'm always playing the long game, And I know that if I keep saying, let's just keep talking to young people about what they want and need, we're going to hear the arts.
Yeah.
They will become the advocates for it.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, in a way, that's where I am.
Yeah, that's very interesting because this whole idea of relationships, again, it's like how do we kind of not fight against them, other people, but just like kind of find a way to connect and like form a relationship and then show them like not to like prove them, but just kind of through conversations or just like ideas of what can be done. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm thinking what like it makes me thinking is also about like when people talk about like I especially love like looking at arts integration. Like I don't find like subjects as separate. Like I feel like okay, if I'm learning something, it's just like a way I learn, and there are like mathematical things, there are scientific things, you know, like just to have these academic language. Like I'm learning of all of these things which are part, like in especially early years we don't have subjects, like we are doing all the thinking together, and like I don't know why we don't do it all across the classroom. So which is again like a whole other thing. But I'm curious, like what has been your like experience of bringing like looking at like arts as a way of like integrating?
Well, I think the first thing, I just to sort of state something that is kind of obvious for me, but I think important, is that I don't think it's good when the arts ed community sets up a binary that it's either integration or it's teaching the arts for themselves, right, as individual domains. To me, that's a completely false dichotomy.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do we get? I mean, the arts. I mean, I agree with you completely. The arts are an incredibly powerful tool and a way to open up domains and disciplines that might be difficult, or I mean, every academic discipline, none of which, the separation of the disciplines do not reflect reality in the world.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'll go back to the forest. Let's walk through a forest.
Yeah.
We've got all of the disciplines there.
Yeah.
We've got poetry. We've got biology. We've got mathematics. We've got, they're all there. So it's this separating out that we've done in over a very long period of time, that essentially those of us who care about integration and look to integration are trying to bring our studies back to the world itself. And then we draw on and learn the disciplines in order to understand things. That's why I'm so interested in the world as the classroom, and going outdoors, in going around the city, the man-made world, the natural world, because we want to try to help young people understand these things, make sense of them. And you're going to do that. You need many, many tools to do that. And in time, we want them to be able to solve some of the problems we've made.
Yeah.
Right? And they need multiple tools, and they need the collaboration across disciplines that we should be modeling in our classes. If you entire K-12, you're essentially going from this topic to this topic, and you're never seeing their interconnectedness and their wholeness, and you are kind of intellectually stunted when you emerge, because you haven't had the daily experience of being able to sort out yourself and with your colleagues, what do we need in order to understand this phenomena in the world, this tree growing, this building that was built.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that is, and I think that's why I also like bring like Regio is like why Regios should not be just early years. It should be like all years of education, like adults, young children, everybody, because it's more about languages of learning and like I mean like they do use a lot of different kinds of arts, but it is so interconnected and like how like their mark making kind of shows so many of their thinking. Like literally we have proof of like what kind of thinking which are emerging through that. That's amazing. And I think like to kind of summarize this conversation, I would love like for you to hear like any conversation which you remember from your students, any students like or any age groups, like not just like school but grad school, which kind of stayed with you on like which is related to the importance of like why we do this work, like why we still continue to work in the space of arts education, or any question which you're sitting with around this space.
Conversation 2 days ago with a former arts and education program student, sure, but she's on the faculty in higher ed, teaching photography and related things with a focus on questions of disability. She asked me, we haven't talked since I retired, and here she is in a higher ed career trajectory. And she asked me, I'm not sure if this is exactly what it was, but it was this, I think how I heard it was, do you feel good about your choice to become an educator? And it was a hard question for me to answer, not because I'm ambivalent about it, but because I don't think I ever made a choice. I got a phone call, I said yes. I was still interested, I continued on. I never, and it was very interesting. I mean, it's been interesting for me since I retired from the faculty here, because K-12, I did not like school. I was not a happy student, ever, or very rarely. Some of that, I believe, was because I had hearing loss and I was struggling. It was very hard for me. But I didn't like schools. I had a lot of critique of schools. And then I spent 50 years working in schools. So her question was like a really good one. I think in the end, my answer is that I think that the survival of the species depends on teaching. We all do it. Everyone is a teacher at some point. Whether it's the grandma teaching, the uncle teaching, cousins teaching each other, friends, on and on and on and on. Some of us make it our explicit life's work. And that is an incredible honor to be in that relationship. Most of the time, you're in that relationship to people younger than yourself, not always. It's an incredible honor, it's an incredible responsibility, and it's a space for lifelong research, which is another way of saying lifelong learning. So my answer to Sarah is, I don't think I ever made the choice, but I don't know how I could ask for anything more meaningful.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much.